Hi guys, welcome back to the channel for another video. I can completely tell how much better my anxiety is these days because every single time I film, I am not joking, every single time I film, there is always a whippersnipper, or there is like a street cleaner truck, or there is like somebody drilling on the roof, and it would send me like spiraling until I just couldn't make a video. And now I'm just like, oh, screw it. If they can hear a whippersnipper, like, it's free content. Everyone's going to be okay. But I'm also in a really cheerful mood because it's almost Christmas and I am going to Lord Howe Island for Christmas, which is so exciting. I'm going with my family and getting on a plane and flying over a body of water. It's still in the same state. I got in trouble from a few people on my Instagram story the last time I went to Lord Howe. It's completely legal. It's completely safe. It is the same state that I live in currently. It's just over a body of water. Can't believe I have to stipulate that, but welcome to the internet. Anyway, because it's almost Christmas and because this is the time of year when I hear from a lot of people feeling all kinds of anxious, all kinds of, trepidation about being with family or comments that might come up or interacting with food, etc. I wanted to do a bit of a, toolkit for Christmas sort of video as it relates to recovery. Obviously, that's usually what we're talking about here. So I wanted to give my top 3 tips or bits of advice for how to approach the holidays. It's as general as it can be to apply to as many as it can, but hopefully with enough specific stuff in here that, you can take some action that might really practically help you day to day throughout the holiday period. So the first most important bit of advice that I could give to anyone who is in recovery going into the Christmas season is to be flexible and compassionate with your goals and expectations of yourself throughout this period. When I talk to clients as holiday periods are coming up, or if it's their birthday or whatever, if it's going to be an event that centers around lots of interaction with people and food, etc., what I tell them is that challenges are built into the upcoming period. So believing that you should be able to manage all these unforeseen things that are about to come up and all of these additional just day-to-day life challenges, and to be able to complete all of the challenges that we might be setting in session, and to do all the work and to do the admin and to do blah, 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 is really unreasonable. How do we know that it's unreasonable for ourselves? Well, because we would probably think it was unreasonable for somebody else to take this perfectionistic black and white view of how they're meant to be handling recovery in one of the most notoriously stressful periods within the year. Particularly with the added layer of very specific stress of COVID, right? You might be dealing with family stress, with whether or not people can actually attend, people not seeing each other for a long time, people having conflicting opinions about COVID or politics or whatever it is. It's a pretty intense time across a few different categories that most people talk about, right? If you don't know what to talk to somebody about, talk about COVID. Unless they have conflicting opinions to you, in which case maybe to preserve your recovery, it's okay not to have to advocate for everything all the time, right? Pick your battles. So the number one goal that I set with clients is to be as compassionate and flexible with yourself as you can be. There's an important caveat here. Being flexible and compassionate and forgiving of yourself if things don't go to plan is not a preemptive bit of permission to fall backwards, right? You may slip up a bit or, run into a bit of trouble, but to let the voice get in and go, it's okay for you to completely fall off the wagon and pretend you're not noticing is very different to, oh, I did not see that coming, or I couldn't have seen that coming, or I really tried and things just didn't go according to plan, right? It's kind of like when I get clients to go into a maintenance and management phase of recovery where we're not actively pursuing goals. We're just sitting in our current phase of recovery and just kind of taking stock of where everything is and taking stock of our accomplishments and what we've learned. And then we go into the next phase. I always say to clients, this is not permission to relapse. And if you hear that little nudge in your head of if you just stopped doing this and that, it would be fine because you're maintaining and managing. It's not the same thing, right? So being flexible and compassionate with yourself means dialing down the black and white perfectionistic thinking about recovery, which is something to work on, whether or not it's Christmas, and to really be very, very aware that there are built-in challenges coming up. So maybe to discuss with your treatment team or to reflect on how you're setting your own goals, etc., and to make that as accessible and achievable as possible, given it's a different context. It is not fair for us to approach our whole recovery with the same expectation, right? Like if you have a loss in the family, is it fair for you to expect that you can do what you can do on a week when life is like pretty smooth sailing, as opposed to a big catastrophic horrible event happening? Probably not, right? Our attention needs to go where it needs to go. My favorite thing that I ever learned from Carolyn Costin: meet people where they are and meet yourself where you are. Do what you can, do your best at what you can, be forgiving of yourself if it doesn't all go to plan. And if it doesn't, sit down, reflect on it, learn from it. If this were to come up again, what would have been valuable to know? What could you do differently? Don't beat yourself up, learn from it, because life is cyclical. This stuff's going to come up again, and you have the opportunity to learn where you're probably wasting time beating yourself up for it and not going according to plan. Second tip is your girl boundaries. And this applies to people in recovery, people recovered, people who've never even had an eating disorder. Boundaries at this time of year, super, super important. But as it relates to recovery, I think people focus too much on how can I avoid people's comments? How can I stop people from saying things that are unhelpful? And there's certain things we can do, right? Like if we're in a position where maybe we can ask partner or mum or sibling or whomever to ask certain family members who are like at risk of saying unhelpful things to maybe not say specific things. There are some instances I work with clients where they're like, yes, that is something that I could ask a loved one to do, and it works really well. You may not have that. That may not be an option to you, so that wouldn't be helpful. But if it is, that's a tip you could use to sort of have a bit of help seeking in the mix where you're asking somebody else to communicate, this is helpful, this is not helpful, with where they're at the moment. You can have boundaries in that where you feel comfortable and where you feel it would be productive to express to people if they say something unhelpful, that isn't helpful. Please don't say those things. I understand that, this might be hard to understand. Eating disorders are really complex, right? Let them off the hook a little bit. But just to say that sort of thing at this point for me is not a really helpful contribution, etc. It's down to you to assess whether or not that's going to be a productive thing to say, right? That's not a blanket piece of advice. If you have a cousin who you're really close to, who you're like, they'd be receptive to me saying that, and it would then stop maybe any future comments from coming up over Christmas, or at least mitigate and reduce them a little bit. If it's like Uncle Joe, who just notoriously doesn't care what other people think of what he says, that's not going to be helpful, right? So the boundaries, in fact, if you were to say that to Uncle Joe, he's probably just going to say a bunch of even more unhelpful and invalidating stuff. So don't be a glutton for punishment and go looking for even worse reactions where we instinctively think they're going to be unhelpful. Sometimes it might be a surprise, but if you're pretty sure that conversation is only going to make you feel worse at the end of it, don't bother. Don't go there. Don't stand on that landmine. In that case, the boundary is about giving yourself permission to walk away, giving yourself permission to go and have some time out, whether or not it's out in the backyard on your phone for 5 or 10 minutes, going and, texting or calling somebody, maybe going and grabbing a relative, a sibling or mum or whomever who might be able to help kind of like hear what you have to vent and grounding you again. Or even to just slip away. I always say to people, like, do you know how to get out of an uncomfortable conversation? Just make them really uncomfortable. Tell them you have explosive chronic diarrhea. And then when you're in the bathroom for half an hour, just like playing on your phone, sitting on the floor, just, distracting yourself, no one's going to come and knock on the door because you've told them about the explosive chronic diarrhea. So that's a really great way to set boundaries. It's something I would say, but it's not something that you have to say. So that's another form of boundaries, giving yourself permission to step away and give yourself some time. The most important boundaries, if options 1 and 2, expressing your boundaries or enacting them by removing yourself, are not possible, the most important boundary in any context, recovery or otherwise, is the boundary between you and you. If somebody says something to you that brings up an unhelpful thought, an eating disorder self-thought, a critical thought, whatever it is, and you let that thought permeate or like set up shop in your head, then that is the boundary that you need to enforce. That healthy self stepping in and saying, we've got to unpack this. We've got to dialogue about it. We've got to help seek about it. I've got to take that into session with my therapist. I need to get to the bottom of the impact that thought had on me. So that is your last stand. And that is the one boundary that you always have at your disposal, even if you can't do 1 and 2. Is what you do internally with the impression that other people leave or the interaction that you have with other people, right? So boundaries, incredibly important. I believe that there are certain things we do in recovery that are life skills that we get a crash course in, and boundaries is one of them. And also, like, just don't expect the worst. Sometimes, no, actually more often than not, we expect people to be terrible or behave really badly. And in the last 4 years that I've been working with clients, hello baby, hi. Oh, sorry. The worst case scenario is rarely the likely scenario, right? It's rarely the one that actually happens. We have a tendency to prepare for the worst so that our brains can go, I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. But then we start to interpret that as the thing that is most likely to happen. And it really is very rare for that to be the case. So kind of go in with an open mind, but prepared to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And the third one is equally important, which is support. Trying to get as much of a structure around you to be able to proactively plan for the needs that you might have at the time. Whether or not it's a trusted loved one who you might have a code word with or like a signal for to get you out of a certain situation or change the subject or just to come and rescue you in whatever form you might need. To have that set up preemptively, to be able to maybe plan some stuff for after Christmas, catching up with friends, something to look forward to, somewhere that's a safe place for you where you can vent and you can have whatever support you might need after interacting with people who might not be able to provide that for you. There's obviously online support. Here in Australia, we've got the Butterfly Foundation chat option, which you don't have to call. You can just sit on a browser, on your phone, whatever, and chat to a real person. Or it might be calling to talk over the hotline, hearing human voice down the other end who is understanding and gets it. There's obviously the recovery community coming and plugging in with YouTube videos, podcasts, or Instagram to realize that, that little snapshot that you got with your family of lack of understanding or lack of compassion is not the only option for you, that there are plenty of people who get it, who understand you, who totally have compassion for the challenges that this period will bring up for a lot of us. Being able to schedule your appointments for as close to this period as possible. Obviously, it is a very, very busy time across, every possible category of worker. But mental health is obviously something that spikes for a lot of people around the Christmas, New Year period. So making sure that you are booking in and holding yourself accountable to show up to those appointments. So help seeking is a really proactive thing. That's, a huge thing that I teach people is that help seeking should be more proactive than it is reactive. Letting people know what our challenges might be, what we might need from them, how we might need them to respond, doesn't just help you to learn how to advocate for yourself and how to help seek effectively, not just in recovery, but in all areas of your life. But it gives the other person permission to help you and also gives them some clues about how to help you. I always use this with clients that if somebody in my apartment building right now were to start screaming, help, 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 I wouldn't know how to help them unless I got out of my apartment and went to their apartment and asked them questions, as opposed to if somebody in my apartment building right now started screaming fire, I wouldn't have to move from this seat to hit emergency services and say, we need a fire engine here immediately. There's a fire in the building, right? And then to go out and get some more detail. But the more information we can give the people who we need help from, the more they're able to get to how they can help us most effectively, rather than like a guessing game. Obviously, depending on our own capacity to do that, be reasonable with your expectations of yourself. But if that is something that you can do, that might be a different way to think about and approach help seeking, particularly during this period. So that's it from me as far as holiday advice in recovery. If you have anything that's been really helpful to you during the holiday period, don't hesitate to leave it in the comments below. Obviously, let me know anything that you found helpful, or, just generally your feelings about the words that came out of my mouth. I will obviously be posting next week. There has been a new podcast episode that would have gone up this week. I don't know what it is, but I will leave links to the podcast below. I'm sure it's fantastic. Go check that out if you haven't already. And I will look forward to seeing you all in the new year. I have such a good feeling about 2022. Genuinely, probably the most excited I've been for New Year's in some time. I know we all said that about 2021, but I was a bit cynical about 2021. 2022, I think, has good vibes behind it. But sending you all a ton of love, wishing you the most wonderful holiday period. Stay safe, stay kind, take care of yourselves, and I will see you next year. Bye, guys. How interesting. Green pen. Christmas time. Do I have a red one? I do. I love stationery. Does anybody else love stationery? Like, I could spend hours. I will not go clothes shopping. I order all my clothes online because I hate clothes shopping. Stationery shopping, though, totally different story. What are you doing? Get on with it.